This episode is brought to you by Buffalo Trace Distillery. Powerful yet smooth. Contained but never tame. Proudly going their own way, but never going alone. This is the spirit inside Buffalo Trace Bourbon. Made at Buffalo Trace Distillery, the world's most award-winning distillery. Buffalo Trace is always perfectly untamed. Distilled, aged, and bottled by Buffalo Trace Distillery, Franklin County, Kentucky. 90 proof, 45% alcohol by volume. Learn more at buffalotracedistillery.com. Please drink responsibly.
We see you getting after your fitness goals. But what about those money goals? You can count on Credit Karma for a clear view of your finances and your progress, helping you see results so you can keep checking off those financial personal bests and find your way to money. Progress never felt so good. Download the Intuit Credit Karma app and start achieving your money goals today. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on.
Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. It is yet another slow week in the world of Nintendo, but we have a couple of new releases to discuss and another very important to the history of Nintendo topic to touch on. Later in this episode, I will be joined by my colleague at Game Informer, Marcus Stewart, to go over those new releases. But for now, it is just going to be me as we touch on a very important historical topic here. 10 years ago to the day that this episode is hitting the main podcast feeds, Satoru Iwata passed away. So I'm going to use the first portion of this episode to touch on and celebrate and really just run down the life and legacy of the late president and CEO of Nintendo, who again passed away 10 years ago this week. So we will be doing that. It's just going to be me for this first segment. And then, like I said, Marcus Stewart will join me later on. But before we get to the discussion around Satoru Iwata, I did want to just give a reminder that this show is brought to you by the members on the Patreon page. Without their support, I really could not continue doing this show. If you want to come and join the fun, you can come in as low as $3 a month. That will get you access to the community Discord, where we just had our first ever All Things Nintendo community night, where we played Mario Kart World together. It was super fun. We're going to probably do it again sometime very soon. There are also $5 and $10 tiers that get you perks like early and ad-free episodes and shout-outs at the end of the show. If you would like to help me continue doing this podcast each and every week, you can head to Patreon and search All Things Nintendo, or type in patreon.com/Brian Shea Podcasts. And you can also find All Things Nintendo merchandise over on Dashery. So with that out of the way, housekeeping aside, let's get into this topic. I think that when a lot of people talk about the Nintendo luminaries, there is sometimes a tendency, I think, to gloss over the genius of Satoru Iwata and how important he was to the overall trajectory of Nintendo. We obviously, there's so many legends who have walked through the doors of Nintendo, their Kyoto office. But, everybody's rightfully has always praised the likes of like Shigeru Miyamoto, Takashi Tezuka, the newer wave of like Eiji newer wave. He's been with Nintendo for over 30 years and we're still calling him the newer wave. But, all the way up to the true newer waves like Shiro Mori and Hidemaru Fujibayashi, who have been directing franchises like Mario and Zelda. Those are the people that I think often in the modern context get a lot of the attention. But I think that if you talk to any one of them, any person who has been at Nintendo at any point in the 21st century, really, they will sing the praises of Satoru Iwata and give him his dues. I know that, when I had Reggie Fils-Aimé on this show, he has nothing but the utmost respect and love for Satoru Iwata and his accomplishments. And it's important that we convey how important somebody like Iwata was whenever we have the chance, but like especially when it's a milestone anniversary. I can't believe it's been 10 years since his passing. We'll get into that in a little bit. For people who want to kind of know like kind of the foundational information about his life, he was born in 1959 in Sapporo, Japan, and his first encounter with computers was actually in middle school when he used a demo computer that had access to like a telephone line. And after that experience, he actually bought a numeric game called Game 31. And it was just basically the thing that would help him pass the time on his train ride to and from school. And from there, he became just obsessed with programming and gaming. And he started saving his allowance and washing dishes with the goal of buying an HP 65 programmable calculator, which I had like a graphing calculator when I was in school, and it let me download and trade and play video games. And you could also, develop them on this calculator. And this seems like it's very similar to like the TI-83 Plus that I used to use in school. So this is the HP 65 programmable calculator, and he used that to make pretty rudimentary games like volleyball and missile attack. And then 4 years later, he saved up again to buy a Commodore PET or Commodore PET, which he immediately took apart so he could study and understand how the inner workings of that system worked. So after he attended high school, Iwata actually moved to Tokyo to attend the Tokyo Institute of Technology, where he studied computer science. And during college, he was actually an intern at Commodore Japan, so he could get more experience with computers under his belt. And his supervisor there, Yash Terakura, became a mentor of sorts to Iwata. And Iwata just became so immersed in creating video games that he lived in an apartment in Akihabara in Tokyo, which if you've ever been to Tokyo, it's kind of like the center of the world for like gaming related things. There's a ton of game centers, which, is like the Japanese terminology for like an arcade. And there's a lot of like video game stores and like kind of like nerd culture stuff, like comics and manga shops. It's really like a mecca for like nerd culture, especially today when like it's become so much more mainstream. But he would actually sit in his apartment and spend a lot of his days coding video games, to the point where he would have so many games in his room that his classmates referred to his room as Game Center Iwata. And what he would do was he would actually take these games that he would program, and he would go to the Saibu department store in Akihabara to show off his creations to the employees there, because these employees understood technology, where like it seems like maybe some of his classmates like poked a little bit of fun at him. The department store employees actually respected what he was doing. And a few of the employees actually banded together to create a video game studio in 1980. And when they did that, they knew that they wanted to invite Satoru Iwata to join them. So they did that, and the studio ended up being called HAL Laboratory, which may ring a bell for a few of you out there if you have played certain games in Nintendo's catalog, which we are going to get into here very shortly. But Iwata started as a part-time programmer actually at HAL while he was still attending college, and then only after he graduated did he become a full-time employee at HAL. And early on in HAL's life, they actually made a device that could let old computers display video game graphics. So, a lot of older computers, they were mostly text-based. So this device actually let those computers translate this language into displaying graphics on the screen. And that let the development team members create knockoff versions of like popular video games at the time to practice creating games. And the flip side of this is all very exciting for Satoru Iwata and the team at HAL. But Iwata's father was actually a politician, and he was just elected mayor at the time. And he did not approve of video games as a career. And I actually found a profile on IGN that said that his family didn't talk to him for 6 months after he took this job at HAL. I don't know if they ever reconciled. I'm assuming they did, if it was only like 6 months. But yeah, I mean, it just really goes to show how different the attitudes towards gaming was back then. So HAL actually was the first outside studio to obtain licenses for Namco games. But then in 1983, Iwata actually traveled from Tokyo to Kyoto to visit Nintendo's headquarters to ask Nintendo if HAL could make games for the NES. And Nintendo granted that permission. And Iwata began working with HAL on porting several games. One of them was the arcade game Joust, bringing that to the NES. And they started developing a ton of games for the NES, and games like Balloon Fight and Defender 2 and Millipede. And I would say that it's really like those games were popular. Balloon Fight is obviously a game that Iwata was very well known for. But I would argue that the company really didn't forge its true identity until the 90s. So Nintendo actually reached out to HAL in the late 80s to work on a game called NES Open Golf or Open Tournament Golf. But it turns out that HAL actually was not Nintendo's first choice. But basically what had happened was every other studio that Nintendo approached told them that it would be impossible to fit that data all onto an NES cartridge. Like, they wanted 18 holes on this cartridge and nobody could figure it out. But Iwata pretty confidently said he could figure it out, which led to HAL taking on this project, and it led to Iwata creating his own data compression method so that all 18 holes could fit on the NES cartridge. And so this started really like kind of like a legend of Satoru Iwata as this genius programmer. And in addition to that, shortly thereafter, he helped create parallax scrolling for a game called F1 Race, because the NES actually didn't support parallax scrolling at the time, which made racing games pretty difficult to put on an NES in a meaningful way. But Iwata figured it out for the NES. So he was slowly building this kind of legend, the becoming known for like these incredible skills as a programmer. And in 1992, he worked with the newest hire at the company. HAL had just brought in this 19-year-old named Masahiro Sakurai to create an all-new game called Kirby's Dream Land. And Sakurai created the character and served as the director of the game while Iwata actually programmed it. And believe it or not, that first Kirby game sold more than 5 million copies and was the highest grossing Kirby game for 30 years. And it wasn't actually dethroned until 2022's Kirby and the Forgotten Land on Switch, which is so wild to think about when you consider how many Kirby games exist in the world right now. And actually, despite Kirby's Dream Land being a pretty big success, HAL was actually struggling pretty hard financially. And they were looking to replace their president. And Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi actually recommended to HAL a year after the release of Kirby's Dream Land to put Iwata as president. And they did. And Iwata was president of HAL for 6 years. And in that time, Iwata erased 1.5 billion yen in debt and actually stabilized the country or the company. And he continued working directly on games as a programmer and producer, even though he was also fulfilling duties as president. Like, he seemed like he really loved programming games, and that was something that he really wanted to continue doing, even as he ascended to like the executive levels within these companies. So he was actually co-producer with Shigeru Miyamoto on multiple Kirby sequels. He co-produced Earthbound with Tsunekazu Ishihara, which again, that might be another familiar name for a lot of people listening to this. And Iwata would actually establish this relationship with Ishihara and would go on to help Ishihara found a new company called Creatures Inc., which today is known as one of the owners and creators of the Pokemon franchise. So that bond between Ishihara and Iwata remained strong, and Ishihara would continue bringing Iwata in to help with a few of the Pokemon titles after Creatures Inc. was founded. and Ishihara would become the president of the Pokemon Company, which he still is to this day. So Iwata actually helped with the localization strategy for Pokemon Red and Blue, and then he assisted directly with the development of Pokemon Gold and Silver. I've searched so hard to find because the big rumor is that Iwata was the reason that in Pokemon Gold and Silver, spoiler alert, at the end of that game, you can leave Johto and go back to Kanto, which is the region from Pokemon Red and Blue. And the story, the legend has long been that they couldn't figure it out. So Iwata came in and like basically programmed it overnight to make it work. I could not find any corroboration for that in any kind of meaningful or solid way. Instead, the stuff that I was finding, it seems like the compression techniques that Iwata helped with in Gold and Silver were more kind of based on squeezing as much graphical power out of a Game Boy cartridge as possible. So it was still a very important thing. I just don't know if it was like specifically one-to-one, although, you know, data compression can lead to a lot of things, such as being able to fit more like land mass into a game. So it could stand to reason that his compression techniques were used in order to put an entire second region in that, but I just couldn't find any direct evidence that said that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I missed something. But he also assisted in porting the battle system from Pokemon Red and Blue to the Nintendo 64 for the game Pokemon Stadium. And I found several Iwata asks over the course of my research for this episode. And this one was actually from Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And according to that process of porting the battle system from Red and Blue to Pokemon Stadium on N64 just took Iwata like 1 week, which is wild. So in the interview, Iwata said, "At the time, I wasn't a Nintendo employee, but was president of HAL Laboratory. At the same time, I was a board member at Creatures Inc., and I ended up being involved in analyzing the best way to localize the overseas versions of Pokemon Red and Pokemon Green," which is Pokemon Blue in the US. "For that reason, I got hold of the source code for Pokemon Red and Green, and I would study that and suggest ways to localize it to the relevant department at Nintendo." And then Pokemon's Morimoto, who was the director of Heart Gold and Soul Silver, said, "I created that battle program, and it really took a long time to put together. But when I heard that Iwata-san had been able to port it over in about a week and that it was already working, well, I thought, what kind of company president is this? I was saying things like, is that guy a programmer or is he the president? I was really taken aback that you could get to grips with such a complicated program in such a short space of time." And then Ishihara chimed in, "I remember thinking that there just weren't that many people out there who would be able to read the entire Game Boy source code, which was by no means written in a highly refined programming language, and grasp how everything connected with everything else. So Iwata-san, you analyzed the whole thing and reworked the code, decided on the way to localize Pokemon Red and Pokemon Green, got the battle system running on N64. I was surprised that you managed all that." So again, just more examples of these well-respected developers just giving Iwata his flowers for his technical genius. So in 2000, Iwata actually left HAL and joined Nintendo. But just before stepping away from HAL, he assisted with the development of one more game at the studio. And that game was on Nintendo 64, Super Smash Brothers, which was another project led by Masahiro Sakurai. And, you know, I've done a history of Super Smash Brothers in the past. But just for like a quick rundown, basically Sakurai created this prototype and Iwata saw it and said like, "Hey, I think this would work really well with licensed characters." So Sakurai made a prototype build with those licensed characters, Nintendo characters. Originally, they pitched Shigeru Miyamoto, and Miyamoto turned them down. But then Iwata asked if they could show the demo. And when they showed Miyamoto the demo, he said, "Okay, yeah, I give my blessing for this." So again, Iwata is just immeasurably important to another massive franchise. So far, what do we have? We have Kirby, we have Pokemon, and we have Super Smash Brothers as franchises that he left his just indelible mark on. And this is all before he even joined Nintendo. And it seems that like as much respect that everyone had for Iwata, it seems like Iwata had that much respect for everybody else. But in particular, he had nothing but praises to sing for Masahiro Sakurai. And I found an Iwata Asks interview with Sakurai for Super Smash Brothers Brawl. And Iwata had this to say about Sakurai. He said, quote, "My decision to pursue the project in this way rested on one point and one point alone, and it is deeply tied to the point about which I have the utmost faith in a man named Masahiro Sakurai. To state it simply, you are capable of taking a project with nothing and visualizing a completed game almost perfectly in your head. As I mentioned earlier, and I have a long history working together, you and I have a long history working together at HAL Laboratory. When involved on the same project, you were able to point out the smallest details, even when the product had yet to take shape. The details were so small and so specific that, as a programmer, I thought there was no way you could know what you knew without actually trying it first. As the game progressed and took shape, however, it was clear that we needed to address the details in just the way you had described. So I would ask, did you really know this from the start? I mean, this was over 10 years ago, and I remember you said you did, and I thought to myself, is this guy for real? As it happened over and over again, however, I had little choice but to believe you." And it seemed like in his response, Sakurai was just like, thanks for the compliment. Like he did not know how to take that strong of praise. It was quite endearing moment in the interview. So in 2000, Iwata did join Nintendo as the head of its corporate planning division and became a member of the board of directors. And 2 years later, Hiroshi Yamauchi retired from Nintendo after 53 years as president. And he was the third president in Nintendo history, and every single person who had taken that mantle to that point had the Yamauchi name. It was a member of the Yamauchi family. And Yamauchi broke that tradition and named Satoru Iwata as his successor, and Iwata became Nintendo's fourth president and the first president without that Yamauchi name. And there was a Eurogamer profile that I also read, and apparently Yamauchi broke the news to Iwata in a way where he invited Iwata into his office and gave him a lecture about like mistakes and overcoming mistakes. And Iwata basically said that he thought that he was about to be fired because he was getting this long lecture. But then at the end, he was shocked to learn that rather than being fired, he was going to be named the next president of Nintendo. And in the announcement, Yamauchi said this, quote, "Taking into account the things I've encountered in my experiences as Nintendo president, I have come to the conclusion that it requires a special talent to manage a company in this industry. I selected Iwata-san based on that criteria. Over the long term, I don't know whether Iwata-san will maintain Nintendo's position or lead the company to even greater heights of success. At the very least, I believe him to be the best person for the job." And then on his way out, Yamauchi said, "Coincidental to my leaving the company, I would like to make one request, that Nintendo give birth to wholly new ideas and create hardware which reflects that ideal, and make software that adheres to that same standard. Furthermore, this software should attract consumers as new and interesting." So Iwata took that to heart, it really seems. He started work on improving the GameCube's standing, which was at the time solidly in third place behind the PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox. And Xbox was really focused on pioneering online gameplay in the console space. You know, this was around the time that Halo and Halo 2 was kind of right on the horizon. So Iwata actually wanted to continue focusing on offline experiences while not shutting off online entirely, but he wanted to focus on delivering offline experiences, but he also wanted to develop a better relationship with third parties. And the one that he really reached out to was Capcom, which ultimately led to several big name Capcom games arriving on Nintendo systems. And Iwata actually stated that he felt that gaming was becoming too exclusive and that, you know, it was driving away parts of the market that would otherwise be interested if it was a little bit more approachable. And he also kind of adopted the mindset that graphics shouldn't be the be all end all of whether a game is getting attention or not. So he decided that he wanted to steer Nintendo towards creating games that reached a broader audience, including people who don't even really consider themselves gamers. So Iwata started changing the culture of Nintendo and really established himself as kind of the approachable president. So he would schedule meetings directly with hundreds of employees. Instead of this approach that Yamauchi had, where he only met with people if absolutely necessary. And there's a quote that I found that Shigeru Miyamoto described the previous atmosphere around Nintendo's kind of corporate culture as a little bit stuffy. And at a keynote speech at Game Developers Conference 2005, Iwata got up and he said his famous quote, "On my business card, I'm a corporate president. In my mind, I'm a game developer, but in my heart, I am a gamer." And he really leaned into this notion and started hosting the Iwata Asks interview series, which I've already referenced a couple of times already in this episode. And you can still actually find this interview series in its entirety over on Nintendo.com. I was actually worried that they had wiped it because some of the old links were no longer leading to the old interviews. But thankfully, there is a landing page where you can read all of these, and they are such gems of content and like time capsules. But also, like, you know, if there's a new Mario Kart game out, he would interview the developers about how they created the series, and then leading it up to here. It almost feels reminiscent to how I write my cover stories at Game Informer, where I love tracing the history before talking about what's new in a series. I certainly did that with the Borderlands cover story. I've done it with the Sonic Frontiers cover story, Street Fighter 6. Like, that's really been like the approach that I've adopted as well. And I don't know if that's subconscious, the way that I read all these interviews when I was younger, or if that is just kind of like the way that storytelling makes sense to me. But it's really fascinating to see that he took a similar approach, because basically he would sit with these developers and interview them. And because he was such an expert and so well respected, you got some of the best insight you could ever get from Nintendo. And a lot of these times he was in the weeds with these developers. So prior to that keynote, he actually, in 2003, hired Reggie Fils-Aimé, who, again, has been on this podcast before. And Reggie, previous to working at Nintendo, worked at companies like Guinness, VH1, Pizza Hut, all kinds of places. And Reggie became the next president of Nintendo of America. And the two of them developed an extremely close relationship. So they really worked well together. I read Reggie's Disrupting the Game book before I interviewed him, and you know, you can tell that he has a reverence for Satoru Iwata that only comes from having a fantastic relationship with him, but also having worked with him. I think they worked together for about a decade, so you know, there was a lot of love between those two. And we'll get into his reaction to the sad news that we're kind of commemorating in this later on in this episode. But yeah, you can just tell that there was something special between them in terms of a working relationship. So in a 2004 interview with GameSpot, Iwata said that games he felt like they'd come to a dead end, and that developers needed to expand their market if they wanted the industry to survive. So he expressed an interest in making Nintendo an innovator in this regard, which was really delivering on the request that Yamauchi had made on his way out, of exploring new ideas and creating hardware and software to support that. So over the next few years, he really leaned into that, because he would introduce the Nintendo DS alongside Reggie. And then, that innovated in the handheld gaming space, introduced an extra touch screen. And then the Wii was after that, which, you know, I don't have to really lecture to too many people listening to this podcast of how revolutionary that was, thanks to its use of motion controls. But the idea for the DS was actually a combination of Iwata, Miyamoto, and then an old idea from Yamauchi. Yamauchi wanted to do a handheld device with two screens, and Miyamoto was really about the touchscreen idea for like input for software. And Iwata kind of married those two ideas together to kind of deliver with the design team the idea of the DS. And the DS would actually go on, and we've talked about it on this podcast before, it would go on to sell 154 million units, which makes it the second best-selling video game system of all time, which is only slightly behind the PlayStation 2 and, as of 2025, just ahead of the Switch 1. So the Wii, obviously also an enormous hit. And Iwata's directive for that was to develop a system that was fun for everyone, whether it was a kid, a teenager, or a mom. And the result from Iwata's directive was the Wii Remote, which was, in his estimation, going to be universally understood as a form factor to anyone who had held like a TV remote before. And they intentionally called it a remote instead of a controller because they wanted people to make that connection, that it was like all you do is point to what you want to control and you can do that. Iwata also wanted to push for quality of life devices. Like he was really aggressive about greenlighting the Wii Fit board. That was a project that Miyamoto had come up with. And by the end of 2009, as a result of the DS and Wii's success, Nintendo had made 279 billion yen of profit, which equated at the time to about $2.8 billion in the US. So pretty massive success from those two enormously selling things. And then in 2011, Iwata innovated yet again by creating a new video series where Nintendo could deliver new trailers and news straight to players. And the series was called Nintendo Direct, which Iwata was also the host of. And in these videos, the public really started to get a sense of kind of like the understated and sometimes like dry or passive sense of humor that Iwata had, and he really didn't mind showing it. Like, we saw everything from that famous scene of him holding the bananas for the Donkey Kong game all the way up to, you know, the fight scene that they made, like it looks like an anime fight scene with him and Reggie, and the puppets to celebrate the Star Fox Zero. It was, you know, it really let Iwata showcase that he had personality beyond just being this programming genius and savvy businessman. And it really, and we've seen how much the Nintendo Directs have innovated in the gaming space, all the way, you know, leading all the way up to what we have now. Like with this week, we got a state of play for Ghost of Tsushima, or Ghost of Yote, sorry. And, you know, Xbox does their developer direct. It feels like every major developer or publisher, and even some that aren't major publishers or developers, have their own type of direct to consumer marketing live stream at this point. You know, Capcom and Bandai Namco did theirs in recent weeks. So that's just a huge influence on the direction the industry would take in the subsequent decade and a half. Unfortunately, shortly after that, Nintendo started to experience a bit of a downturn. So the 3DS was, you know, mispriced early on. It didn't have the strongest launch lineup, so it didn't sell particularly well. And the Wii U completely flopped. And in a 2013 financial call, Iwata actually admitted that Nintendo had failed to create a worthy successor to the Wii. And as a result, to minimize the damage to Nintendo, he didn't want to lay off massive amounts of people. Instead, he cut his salary in half to save the company money, and then also cut the salaries of board members by 20 to 30% to try to, just in the hopes of delivering job security and improving the company's short-term finances. And then in 2013, while he was traveling between Kyoto and Tokyo, Iwata was actually sketching up some ideas, and he came up with an idea for toys that could connect to Nintendo games. And less than a year later, Amiibos launched and became a massive hit for Nintendo fans and collectors. I mean, I don't know if you were around during that time in 2014 when Amiibos were just lighting the world on fire. The stores could not keep them stocked. And we saw like Villager Amiibo and Mega Man like skyrocket in value. I know Amiibos are kind of played out right now, and like especially now that they're like apparently $30 a pop, it is now a different proposition. But back in 2014, they were a huge hit. So in 2013, though, Iwata would also become the CEO of Nintendo in addition to being the president. And around that time, Iwata started taking notice of the success of the iPhone. And he did an interview where he with the Huffington Post, where he described smartphones as kind of the enemy of the future. And Iwata saw the kind of the writing on the wall that smartphones were becoming this huge force in gaming. But he didn't necessarily want Nintendo to develop mobile games because he was worried that mobile games kind of sometimes would cut corners and then they would lack integrity as games themselves because they focused so much on profit instead of creating quality games. And Iwata's views would eventually soften on that over the years, which did ultimately lead to Nintendo entering the mobile games market a few years later. And in 2014, on a financial call, he said, quote, "I believe that the era has ended when people play all kinds of games only on dedicated gaming systems," which foreshadowed 2015 when Iwata alongside the rest of Nintendo, forged a partnership with DNA, which was a mobile developer, to create mobile games from Nintendo's property. And his one sticking point was he did not want the quality or integrity of the games to be compromised just because they were going on smartphones. And Iwata, despite, how most mobile games are, he continued claiming that free-to-play games, which he called free to start, threatened the future of quality games, which is one of the main reasons that Super Mario Run, when it came to iPhone, was a premium purchase instead of this kind of the standard free-to-play model where, you'd run out of lives and you could buy more or wait for the cooldown or whatever. And that became just, the model he wanted Nintendo to primarily lean on. So throughout 2014 and early 2015, Iwata actually oversaw development of the next Nintendo console. And he was so involved, he actually went on to become the head developer of what would go on to become the Nintendo Switch. In 2017, Shigeru Miyamoto was interviewed by Time about the launch of the Nintendo Switch. And Miyamoto had this to say, quote, "Ultimately, Mr. Iwata was the head of development, so he put a lot of thought and time into Switch. I think that the idea of Nintendo Switch being a device you could take out and anywhere, and the idea of it being a system that really allows networking and communicating with people, I think that's something Mr. Iwata put a lot of emphasis on. Because Mr. Iwata was tech savvy, a lot of our discussion involved trying to figure out how to make the technical things like network capabilities or servers or whatever fun. For example, I think about when we added the ability to use a browser on the DS. As time goes on, all of these services become more and more advanced. And so we need to think about how do we incorporate mobile devices or new browser features that come up. That's something Mr. Iwata and I discussed a lot, really trying to decide what to do and what not to do in our hardware." So, he heavily involved in the Nintendo Switch in the early phases of its development. However, in June 2014, Iwata was forced to cancel his trip to E3 that year due to health reasons. And later that month, he told shareholders that he had surgery to remove a tumor. And the surgery was a success. And after 4 months of recovery, Iwata had returned to Nintendo and continued working on the Nintendo Switch. Unfortunately, a year later, June 2015, Iwata was once again hospitalized, where he was so devoted to the Switch, he continued work from his hospital room on his laptop. And he even provided feedback to his old pal Tsunekazu Ishihara for a new mobile game where you would move throughout the real world and use your phone to catch Pokemon. And I mean, you don't need me to tell you that a year later, that would go on to become Pokemon Go, one of the biggest video games of all time. Sadly, shortly thereafter, Iwata passed away on July 11th, 2015. Again, 10 years ago to the day that this episode releases. So many people released statements on social media. I still remember the news hitting. I was at Game Informer and in the office that we unfortunately no longer have, but it hit and we all just kind of came together and started sharing like I never got to meet Satoru Iwata, sadly, but the people who had shared their favorite memories, and a lot of us talked about like our favorite games that he worked on and the strategies that he had come up with. It was a gut punch for a lot of us, even those of us that didn't meet him. It was something that he left such a mark on the industry that it was hard to really come to terms with the fact that this guy was gone, and way too soon. It's really awful when you consider how much he gave to the industry. He seemed like a really great person. Everybody who I found quotes from that worked with him never had a bad thing to say about him. And I want to read some of these words that people put out from some of the names you've heard during this first segment of this episode. So Sakurai said, quote, "This isn't a regular day, and my mental state isn't regular either, but I'm going to work as usual. And like always, I'm throwing myself into development. This was also the situation for Iwata-san, doing what you need to do." Miyamoto said, quote, "I'm surprised at this sudden news and overcome with sadness. The entire development team at Nintendo will remain committed to our development policy, which Mr. Iwata and we have been constructing together, and to yield the development results which Mr. Iwata would appreciate." I think Reggie actually gave the most heartfelt statement, which again was reflective, I think, of the relationship that they had. He said, quote, "Mr. Iwata is gone, but it will be years before his impact on both Nintendo and the full video game industry will be fully appreciated. He was a strong leader for our company, and his attributes were clear to most everyone: intelligence, creativity, curiosity, and sense of humor. But for those of us fortunate to work closely with him, what will be remembered most were his mentorship and especially his friendship. He was a wonderful man. He always challenged us to push forward, to try the new, to upset paradigms, and most of all, to engage, excite, and endear our fans. That work will continue uninterrupted." So as a result, Nintendo flew their flag at half-mast for several days after his passing. And Nintendo has actually paid tribute to Satoru Iwata in some of their games after his passing. At the end of Star Fox Zero, there at the credits, it says, "This game is dedicated to our wingman who fell in battle." There's also a character that looks a lot like Iwata in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. That character guides you to the Lord of the Mountain, which is also called Satori, very close to Satoru. And there was also a tribute in Nintendo Switch Online version of the NES golf game, which Iwata programmed the original version of. And in Pokemon Sun and Moon, which came out a couple years after Iwata's passing, Game Freak actually paid tribute to him and the fact that he worked so closely with them on Gold and Silver. There's a Game Freak building in the game that you can go to, and you can talk to the developers, and they talk about how, referencing Pokemon Gold and Silver, they had an amazing guy help them develop their games. I mean, all those tributes aside, I think that Iwata's legacy is pretty impossible to cover in the scope of a podcast episode, but it's so wild to me that you can still absolutely see his influence in today's Nintendo. And it's also worth noting that even though Nintendo at that point had not been profitable for several years when he passed away, he kind of left Nintendo with these last two blessings that he bestowed upon the company before he moved on from this life. The first one was the return to profitability in 2015 for the first time in several years, with the flops of the Wii U and the 3DS. And then the second blessing that he bestowed upon Nintendo was the Nintendo Switch, which, as we covered earlier on in the episode, is the third best-selling video game system of all time now, and really ushered in this new era that we're now seeing with Nintendo, where Nintendo's this unstoppable juggernaut, not just because of the Nintendo Switch, but because of the Mario movie, because of the merchandise and the licensing deals, like with Lego and the amusement park. this era was really kickstarted by Satoru Iwata, and it's really a shame that he was never really able to see it through. But I think that if you were to ask anybody at Nintendo how much Iwata was responsible for this era, I bet all of them would say that this last decade has been a direct result of his influence and his decision making and his work, even though he was not around to see it happen. I personally think that, even in a company that is as known for how many legendary developers have worked there over the years, I think I can't help but say that like Iwata has to be named alongside the likes of folks like Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka and Gunpei Yokoi in terms of the most important employees to ever walk through those doors. It's unbelievable how many incredible games he not only touched but worked on directly. He really feels like he had his hands in every major hit that Nintendo put out, even before he worked at Nintendo. Like we said, before he even became an employee at Nintendo, he had worked on games like Super Smash Brothers and Kirby and NES Golf and Pokemon Red and Blue and Gold and Silver and Pokemon Stadium. These were all pre-Nintendo stuff. And then to come into Nintendo as an executive and then eventually the fourth president in the history of the company is just a mark that I don't know if anybody is ever going to leave that isn't named something like Shigeru Miyamoto or Koji Kondo or Takashi Tezuka. Like, those are the names that Satoru Iwata deserves to be mentioned alongside. And I hope that people understand the importance that he had for the company, that, we all love playing their games. We all love enjoying their products. And, without Satoru Iwata, I don't know where Nintendo would be. But thank you so much for joining me in this journey through the life and legacy of the legendary Satoru Iwata. I cannot believe he has been gone for 10 years. He's just a fantastic influence to the entire trajectory of Nintendo. But we are going to take our only break of this episode. And when we return, I will be joined by Marcus Stewart as we talk about a few new releases that hit Switch this week. We will be right back.
Now at Chipotle, our all-new Chipotle Honey Chicken brings Chipotle heat with a touch of sweet. Seared smoked peppers and savory Mexican spices, blended with a hint of pure honey for a perfectly balanced sauce. All combined with fresh, tender chicken hot off the grill, served up in your favorite burrito or bowl. New Chipotle Honey Chicken takes heat and sweet to a whole new level. But it's only at Chipotle for a limited time. Order now in the app for pickup or delivery. Chipotle, for real.
We are back, and while we are all super excited for Donkey Kong Bonanza to hit next week, we have two new Switch games to chat about today. First up is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, and then at the tail end of this segment, we will talk Missile Command Delta. Joining me for that now is Game Informer's own Marcus Stewart. Marcus, how's it going?
It is going well. Happy to be back here. Is this the first time I've been back since we've been back as Game Informer?
Oh man, has it been? I remember you were on for the ways that we could bring back certain franchises.
Yeah, when was that?
Oh man, I feel like it might have been either right before or right after we announced that Game Informer was back.
Oh, okay.
But it's been a while.
It's been a while, yeah.
it's at least been like 2 or 3 months. But yeah, we've been playing some games. I've been playing some non-Switch games lately. You can look for my review of College Football 26, which unfortunately is not coming to Switch or Switch 2, but that's on GameInformer.com very soon. But we have 2 new games that have come to Switch over this week, one of which I have played extensively in preview format, and I've only played a little bit after getting access to it on the home version. And the other one you have been playing fairly extensively, Marcus. So we're going to start with the one that I have checked out, and that is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. Are you a big Tony Hawk guy? I feel like we've talked about this.
Yeah, I'm a big Tony Hawk guy up to a point. So those first 3 games are my prime. Like, I owned all 3 of them. I played the crap out of them. I thought I could skateboard without really learning how to do it, because in my mind I was like, I'm good at Tony Hawk, so I bet I could go down a half pipe. And then I did that, and it went real bad. So yes, I have a fondness for Tony Hawk 1 through 3. But what's interesting about this remake is that 4 is kind of where I fell off with the series. Like, I played 4, but it was the first one I didn't own. And at the time, I wasn't really on board with sort of the more open direction. And then I never really touched the series after that. So like Underground and American Wasteland, not really my era of Tony Hawk. So yeah.
Okay. So yeah, for me, it was, I got into Tony Hawk through the first game. My cousin brought over his PlayStation 1 to my grandparents' house for like Thanksgiving or something. And I played it, and I was like, I need a PlayStation 1 now because this is incredible. And I did. I got a PS1 along with, I think I got like the Pizza Hut demo disc and a copy of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1. And that demo disc was how I discovered like Siphon Filter and what else was on that? Like Croc, I think, had a demo on that.
Probably. I had the PlayStation Underground subscription. They got those.
Oh, yeah.
I think, probably the same demo disc where that's how I played Metal Gear Solid for the first time.
The best way, the way Hideo Kojima intended.
It worked. I got that game.
So obsessed over 1, obsessed over 2. Even though 3, I think, is the highest reviewed game in the series and like one of the highest reviewed video games of all time on Metacritic, I kind of fell off with 3. Like, I was all about the first 2 entries. So like naturally when the 2020 remake of 1 and 2 came out, I was all over that. I was so excited for that one. 3 and 4 were games that I played. Like, I think I had them on my original Xbox, if memory serves. Like, because the first 2 came out on like PS1, and then I think 3 and 4 were only on like the PS2 generation, and that was when I started kind of falling off a little bit. But then I got back into it through like Underground. I really loved the first Underground in particular, but like I also was a big like Jackass fan, so like the fact that Bam Margera was like the co-star of Underground 2, I was like all about. Even though I've heard that like your nostalgia is carrying a lot of good memories about Underground 2. I've heard Underground 2 is actually pretty bad. But I would be interested to go back and try it now that like I just, I have a little bit more.
You got to wait for them to get to that in the remake cycle, I guess.
I mean, when I've in this current issue of Game Informer, I interviewed several of the skaters, including Tony Hawk, and asked him about like, hey, what's the future of this franchise? And he was like, well, if 3 and 4 are successful as 1 and 2, then like I'll continue lobbying for remakes. So I was like, oh, okay. So I guess a new game is off the table for now. Like, I was kind of leaning towards like, hey, is there like a Tony Hawk 6 around the corner or anything? And he
said, do you remember Tony Hawk 5?
No, nobody does. We should not even mention that.
Stared at you blankly.
Do not invoke that name. Yeah, so it's funny because like I went to this event. I guess it was in May for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, and I talked about it on the show. But like, I think right prior to going to that, I was like, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 can't be as bad as I remember. So I fired it up, and I was immediately reminded that it is as bad as I remember. It was.
I was an intern when that came out at a Game Informer. I was in the office, and I remember talking to, I believe it was Kato who reviewed that. Mm-hmm. And I was excited because I was like, oh, they're going back to Tony Hawk. And I was watching him play it at his desk. And I was like, oh, is it good? And he's just like, And I was like, first inkling of like, oh no. Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, that was also like a weird period for the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater franchise. Cause like we were coming off of like the ride games where it was like, oh man, like you have to get on like the little, like the rubber skateboard deck that was like motion controlled, that was like at the pinnacle of the era of like, you just have a ton of plastic junk sitting around your house to play video games. It was like right around, like, it was right off the heels of Guitar Hero kind of fading away. It was like, you know, the Wii Fit board, I think, was still in everybody's living room. What else was there? There were a lot of those like steering wheels for Mario Kart that everybody had. And
the one cool person had a DJ Hero turntable.
that was me. I was so into Guitar Hero and Rock Band that I was like, any rhythm game I am going to give a shot, especially if it's from the same companies. So I played some DJ Hero, and I was never.
It's a legit cool controller. I wish I had it.
It is a cool controller. I'm sure I have my DJ Hero deck somewhere. But yeah, because like also in addition to like it coming off Tony Hawk Ride and then Tony Hawk 5, there was also that like weird like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater HD that came to Xbox.
Right.
That was like just a really bad port, and like they did like nothing to modernize it, so it just like controlled like a game from like 15 years prior.
Yeah, this was really the era when the series felt like it was stepping on rakes.
Yeah, like there was nothing this series could do right. So it really, like, it was kind of like Guitar Hero and Rock Band, right? Like it hit a fever pitch. We were getting at least one game a year for a long stretch there. And then it like faded into obscurity, and there were a couple of revival attempts, and most of them failed. For Tony Hawk, all of them failed. And then it just seemed like the series was gone forever. And as we have noticed and have come to know in the games industry, if there is nostalgia for something, they will bring it back. And that is exactly what happened in 2020 with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. Just an incredible remake of those two games. You played it, I'm sure, right?
Oh, it's so good.
It's seriously one of the best remakes, I think, in like the last like 5 years. Like it's
I would say that, especially for value of you're getting two games in one package. So,
and not just two games, like two of the most like influential and well-reviewed video games of all time. Like I think Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 has like a 93 on Metacritic, and like 2 has like I want to say like a 96. So it was like, you know, incredible. They did the thing, the cliche that we always bring up about remakes, where it's like it makes you feel like you remember those games. Because like if you go back, like we said about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater HD, you go back and play the original Tony Hawk's Pro Skater today, there's going to be a lot of stuff that you didn't notice back then, or you did notice and your memory kind of paved over it. So the fact that they made it feel the way that you remember it meant so much. And also it looks the way you remember it, because like if you watch side-by-side footage, it's like, oh my god, how did we ever endure the graphics of the original Tony Hawk games? Yeah, because like, wow, it looked so good back in the day.
The sad thing though is that I don't play as well as I remember I used to be able to. So I remember going into 1 and 2 being like, I'm pretty sure I'm good at this still, and no. It just like heartbreaking. Like it was upsetting how much I was eating it. I was like, I used to nail these. What happened?
Yeah, I remember being much better than I was initially. I mean, I got my groove back a little bit. It is funny though, because I went to that event for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 having that same mindset where it's like, oh yeah, like 1 and 2 just came out, and then like 3 and 4 is now like, and then I picked up the controller thinking, I'm like, all right, I'm going to nail these tricks immediately. And I was like, oh, that's right. It's been 5 years since 1 and 2 came out.
Yeah. Which also, now that you say that, it has been, hasn't it? It doesn't even feel like it's been that long.
I know. It feels like it's just like, oh, that was like 2 years ago. If you asked me, like if I forgot that it came out in 2020 and forgot that this is 2025, I would have been like, yeah, it was about 2 years ago that came out. But no. Yeah. So I was quite rusty when I played at that event. I did start getting like some of my skills back, but still, like it's very clearly been a while. And then it's funny because they had a QA guy there at the event, and he was just like flexing on everybody. He was nailing like 5 million point combos and everything.
He played the game like 50,000 hours every day of his life. That's his job.
It's kind of like when we went to like the Borderlands 4 cover story, Alex and I, and we got there, and like, you know, they're playing with us and everything, and thankfully it's co-op, it's not competitive, and I'm just like, they're just talking casually about like, oh yeah, I'm probably on like my 6th or 7th playthrough right now. And I'm like, what? Like they're just like casually dropping that. And it's like, yeah, you know, I go home and I fire it up for a few hours, and, you know, I'm probably like, you know, probably got about 1,100 hours in this game so far. And it's like, this game is not out until September. So yeah, the long story short, the people who make these games often play these games a lot. And usually it's the QA guys who are the best. And that appears to be the case with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. Which is the game that we're talking about. Now that we've kind of set the table for, there was some difficult times for the Pro Skater franchise. 1 and 2 brought it back. Vicarious Visions was the developer of that, by the way, and they were actually in the process of gearing up for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, and the reason it didn't happen was because Activision unfortunately canceled it and folded them into Blizzard. So then, and apparently, according to Tony Hawk, there were no other development studios that they trusted to do it. So rather than just being like, oh yeah, no, you guys can keep working on this, they were just like, no, we're just going to cancel this. And then enter Iron Galaxy, which is the studio that when Double Helix was purchased by Activision, Iron Galaxy picked up the ball and ran with it with the Killer Instinct reboot back in 2013. But, they've also done a lot of really great ports. They've worked on some really high profile games. They are the studio that ultimately ended up working on this title. So I've played a little bit at home on the Switch 2. So I've been playing the Switch 2 version. And I also played a lot on PC during that preview event. And I've got to say, this is almost exactly what I wanted from a compilation like this. Even though 3 and 4 were not my favorites, I did play them back in the day. I know that 4 has a different structure. The 1, 2, and 3 all do like a 2-minute run, 2-minute like sessions as like their format, whereas 4 was like, hey, you just go out into the world and there's no timer, you can just do whatever you want. This package instead puts them all in that 2-minute session format. It doesn't it basically Wes, who wrote the review for Game Informer, does a good job of describing it as it makes 4 feel less like a remake of 4 and more like a downloadable level pack for 3, which I also agree with Wes's assessment that even though it is kind of spitting in the face of what made that game so unique and like it gave it its identity, I think I prefer the 2-minute sessions over the like open world, like you can just do whatever at your own leisure format. How do you feel about that, Marcus?
Yeah, so I've been playing both games in the remake. And like I mentioned earlier, Tony Hawk 4 was kind of where the series started to lose me because it was so different. And it is that weird thing of like, this is now in the format of the 3 games that I like way more, but in 2025, actually, maybe like I mentioned this on the GI show, and I should have an opinion piece up by the time this airs of like, I kind of am disappointed that I don't have a chance to kind of reevaluate 4 as it is, or as it was, I should say, because I feel like I was maybe a little unfair to it in its day. I think it was a combination of maybe some subconscious burnout because those first 3 games were like annual releases. So like 3 years straight of playing Tony Hawk, even though I love them, I think by the time I got to 4, I was like, oh, maybe I'm starting to, not feeling it as much. And then with it being so different, and that was like, maybe I was a little more resistant to change back then as like a thin 14, 15-year-old. I was like, this isn't the Tony Hawk I know. Whereas now I'm kind of more open to that idea. And I also think that in the time that I've played 4, it feels like the levels were clearly designed for sort of the no timer thing because they're much bigger. But because of that, it feels like I'm running out of time like faster, I guess, even though it's still 2 minutes. But I feel like I'm not getting as much done in the 2 minutes as I did in the other 3 games because they're a little bit more condensed. And so they're a little bit more conducive to doing things quickly. Whereas 4, I'm like, oh man, things are a little more spread out. I got to find like, where's this last keg with these stupid college kids at? And it's like, oh yeah, they designed this in a way. I don't know how much they have tweaked the actual level design. I would imagine not too much, just in the name of maybe faithfulness, but I don't actually know that.
Yeah,
but
I think that they kept it pretty faithful. The stuff that they did was they tried to rework some of the objectives to be more conducive to the 2 minutes. But I think that the levels remain fairly faithful.
Yeah, I guess it's like it feels like I don't get to see as much of the level in 2 minutes as I do in 3, and I guess 1 and 2 as well. So there's a part of me that feels like that's sort of clashing a bit. But yeah, that is again, it is in the format that I prefer, but I just wish I could have had a chance to reappraise it and see like maybe I would like this more now. And it's like, oh, you guys kind of took that away from me, which is a little sad actually. Maybe you should have just. I wonder what their reasoning is for touching or reworking it so much. I don't know if they've said.
Yeah, I interviewed one of the producers, I think it was, at the event, and asked him that, and you could tell he's been asked that by everybody else who interviewed him, because that's everybody wants to know why they did that. And basically it was like, you know what, we have 1 and 2, we're doing 3 and 4. We just want it to feel like a cohesive package instead of just like being like, okay, well, here are 2 distinct games. We wanted it to feel like, all right, you are playing the same game, just like, you know, they wanted it to remain cohesive in the way that 1 and 2 felt cohesive. They wanted to make 3 and 4 feel like they were comparable in that format, which, you know, I don't mind that. Honestly, the biggest thing that I wish they would do is release Tony Hawk 1 through 4 and just have it all in one thing, and I can just jump from one career to the other, or like even have a thing where it's like, all right, I on my PlayStation account, on my Switch account, because I have it across multiple platforms. I've bought this game on second platforms, both on 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. I wish that it would look at my PlayStation account or my Switch 2 account and be like, okay, yeah, he owns 1 and 2. We can just integrate 1 and 2 into like this menu, but I know that's not going to happen. But that would be like the dream for me, because I love having like it like a nice, neat package. Like when Sonic Origins came out, there are problems with that bundle, but I love having like 1, 2, 3 Knuckles and CD all in like a row where I can play them without having to like bounce out to a new game or anything like that. And I would kind of like that for Tony Hawk, but like, yeah, who knows? I doubt they're going to ever do that.
Yeah.
So the level changes aside and like the format, I do know that you can change the timer. I don't know if it works in career mode or if it's just in like free skate, but or any other of like the non-long form versions. But like I know that there is an option to adjust the timer, I think up to 99 minutes. So you essentially get like the open world style of it if you want.
Okay.
Through that. I have not experimented with that too much. But how are you feeling about the rest of this package?
Oh, it's great. Like, I think Tony Hawk 3, it's where Tony Hawk 3, I think, is objectively the best in the series. Though, if you put a gun in my head, so what's your favorite? It's probably 2. Just a little bit more nostalgia for 2 than 3. But I think mechanically 3 is the best. It's been a blast. Again, I'm having the humbling realization that I'm not as good at these games as I once was. And even after, and I haven't played 1 and 2 remake in a while, so I'm having to refresh my whatever skills I had from that. But no, it looks great. It plays well. The soundtrack is weird because I think there's less of the original soundtrack than there was in 1 and 2 remake. So there's a lot more modern songs in a way where like there's some good tracks, but it is sort of like, oh, it's weird to hear this in this game. So like it kind of like clashes with my nostalgia. Like when I booted up the game for the first time, I just hear Lupe Fiasco's Kick Push in the opening menu, and I'm like, oh, that's a great song, and I like Lupe Fiasco, but like, oh, that didn't exist at the time this came out.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I thought it was way later than Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. I think it was only a couple years after those games came out that
Kick Push.
Yeah, didn't that come out?
It's 06 because Food and Liquor is 06 and Tony Hawk 3 is 01. So about 5 years.
Okay.
4 or 5 years, depending on Kick Push came out as a single a little bit earlier, but you know.
Okay. For some reason I had 04 in my mind for Kick Push. But yeah, I mean I did notice that I think there's only 10 songs from 3 and 4 that are in like this package, like the original 3 and 4 that they've brought forward. Yeah. And there's some good ones in there, and like some of the new songs are really good. And, you know, that's keeping with the tradition of the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater franchise. but the classic tracks in 1 and 2 took up a much larger percentage. You are correct in remembering that.
Yeah. I have not heard it yet, but did Ace of Spades make it into 3?
I think so.
Okay, because that was the song for me. That was I'm always confused because the timeline is very close of like what turned me on Motorhead. Was it Tony Hawk 3 or was it Triple H getting the Motorhead theme song? Because they are very close in the timeline.
Yeah. Oh man. So my Ace of Spades story was I mean, obviously I heard it in Tony Hawk and like Guitar Hero and Rock Band and all those games as well. I went to E3, I think 2016, and there was a party for Let It Die, the Grasshopper game, and it was a rock themed party. So they had the composer of Let It Die, who also is the composer of Silent Hill. He had his like metal band perform, and then they had a band called the Hellcat Saints be the headliner. And by the way, this is all emceed by Bill Burr, so that was fun too. Very small club, and to the point that like I just walked up to Bill Burr like while he was like waiting to go on stage and just started chatting with him. I was like, hey man. And they come out and it's just this all-star band of like amazing musicians. So it was Gilby Clarke from Guns N' Roses on guitar. It was Robin Fink of Nine Inch Nails on guitar. It was Dave Kushner of Velvet Revolver on guitar. Josh Freese, who was recently fired from the Foo Fighters, but at the time he was the Queens of the Stone Age drummer. And the bassist, I forget his name, but he was Ozzy Osbourne's bassist. And then Frankie Perez, who is Apocalyptica's singer, he was the vocalist. He just has an incredible voice. He can sing literally like anything, I'm convinced. And then halfway through, Chester Bennington came out and sang probably like 5 or 6 songs. It was just like a cover set, like basically like classic rock songs. And this was probably 2 weeks after Lemmy died. Lemmy, the singer and bassist of Motorhead. Mm-hmm. And they ended by bringing the composer of Silent Hill and the entire group out and did like a gang vocals version of Ace of Spades to close out the show. And it was like one of the coolest moments of my life, probably. I have a video of it somewhere. I need to find that video and share it because it was just like chaos, having like 7 guitarists on stage and like 3 bassists. And it was just like absurdity.
That sounds like Doug's Garage Band from that episode of Doug.
Banging on a trash can, yeah.
3 drummers and like a harpist.
But I mean, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 seems like it's a really great package. Do you have any like reservations of it, like outside of like the weird format?
Not from a gameplay standpoint. Like it plays great, and I'm playing almost exclusively right now as the Doomslayer because that's just stupid. And that's some of the fun parts about Tony Hawk's, just like stupid cameos and stuff. I like that he gets really happy when you do like a trick and land it. I don't know if you've played as him.
No, I haven't.
It's like the most emotion he's ever shown because like you'll do like a sweet combo and he'll just be like. And it's like, never seen you giggle. Like even when you're doing the thing that you love, killing demons, this makes you happier, I guess. But there is like a weird thing. I like no disrespect to Tony Hawk or any of the skaters today, but it is weird that you're playing as like the current versions of them and not just the 2001, 2002 versions of them. Like I don't.
Yeah, I wonder if like. Is there a way, because maybe I'm misremembering, but in 1 and 2, I felt like there were like skins that you could unlock for some of them to make them look like I thought there was like a Tony Hawk like classic skin that you could unlock. I don't know if that was, but like, seeing like Bam as like an unlockable character. And it's like, that's definitely like today's Bam. It's not like the Bam Margera from like, the late 90s, early 2000s. You want
Viva La Bam Bam.
Yeah, exactly. We want that Bam, but no, I mean, it's, I think that, I don't know, it's a weird line to walk because like at the same, like they're modernizing it. They're including like songs from present day, but like it would also, it's like the old thing of like, if I'm playing like NBA 2K26 and I'm playing like the classic teams, I don't want to have like 2025 Michael Jordan. I want to have like 1996 Michael Jordan.
It's just Michael Jordan in his slacks, just with a cigar, just hanging out. Yeah, it's like, again, I'm not trying to be like, oh, they're old, but it is like, oh, this isn't like, my nostalgia isn't with current 50-something-year-old Tony Hawk. Like, it would be better if it was like I said, an option of like, oh, it'd be cool if you had today Tony Hawk and Tony Hawk 3 Tony Hawk. But since it defaults to current Tony Hawk, my strongest memory of is that HBO documentary that is like semi-depressing.
Wait, what? What's this documentary?
Have you not Tony Hawk Until the Wheels Fall Off? Have you not seen that?
No, and why is it depressing?
It very much shines a light on like, so it's about Tony Hawk's career, but it also shines a light on just how kind of broken down he is, and also how he may have an inability to sort of stop like stop skateboarding when maybe he should like it starts with a cold open of him trying to do a 900 and failing over and over and over again.
Well, yeah, like he's 50. He's over 50 years old, right?
And it's like interviews with all the like Bucky Lasik and like Rodney Mullen, and it's like the versions of them that I guess are in this game, and it's just them talking about like, yeah, I can barely walk now, but hey, I love skateboarding. And it's like, it's kind of like watching an old wrestling documentary where you're like, man, I appreciate what you guys have done, but oh man, you guys have definitely paid a price for this, huh?
Yeah, I mean, that's the same thing that whenever you see a lot of older football players, a lot of older basketball players have knee problems as well. That's the tough part, right? It's like these guys, these women, they go in and they give their bodies for our entertainment. And like some sports are better than others. Like you don't see necessarily a ton of like baseball players that are having like rough post-career lives, like unless like they played a certain type of style or they ingested some drugs or maybe injected certain steroids. Maybe that has caused some post-career problems. But like like football players with concussions, boxers and MMA fighters with concussions, and like other breaks and stuff that can happen there. And I can't imagine skateboarding is great for your body with all the kind of joint impact that it has, and like all the bailing that you have. Like falling off a half pipe probably is not great for your body over and over again. You can attest to that.
Can't speak from experience. Not fun. No, you should if you have HBO Max, you should watch it. Like outside of the like sadder parts, it is a fascinating look at his like upbringing and just sort of like the rise of skateboard culture in general. And they do get into the impact of the games at a certain point too. Yeah,
I didn't even know that was a thing.
It was a few years ago. It was like probably like 2022 or 3. It wasn't that
great.
long ago.
I'm glad it's relatively recent, so that'll be cool to watch. Yeah, I'll definitely do that. Any other thoughts on Tony Hawk's Pro Skater before we move on to this other game that you've been playing, Marcus? Because like I could talk about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and like its impact on me for probably an hour, but we're not going to do that. I already went long on the previous segment, but anything you want to close on?
Yeah, I mean, my hangups aside, this is still like a very well done remake, and I'm really happy to see these first 4 games playable in a modern format now. It's cool to see the series live on, and also in a more positive light after again going through the dark period of just like, man, we just can't get a good game out of the series anymore, can we? So yeah, I'm happy with it. I'm having fun with it. I'm going to spend some more time with it. I'm going to try to, do what I did as a kid and try to 100% everything and all that good stuff. And yeah. And that's why I got to get Michelangelo from the Ninja Turtles. I want to play him.
Yes, I was so excited to see him in this game. Are you playing on Switch too?
I'm playing on PS5, but it runs well on Switch too, it sounds like.
Yeah, I'm having a great time. I don't think it runs quite as well as it does on like a PS5 or an Xbox Series X. I've not checked those out, but I've seen footage and it looks like it runs really well. It definitely doesn't run as well as like the souped up PC that I was playing on at the event, but it still hits a steady frame rate. I haven't clocked it or anything, so I can't like outright be like, yeah, it hits 60 frames per second, but it looks good. The graphics, the faces don't look particularly awesome. I don't know how they look on the PlayStation version, but like I was creating like my character and I was like, oh boy, this looks pretty rough, but like the licensed faces look pretty good. But yeah, I did a few runs right before we hopped on here, and I think it looks great, and it's definitely a competent version. It doesn't feel like a super discount version of this game. So yeah, I can recommend the Switch 2 version as well if people are listening to this and want to get that version. I've not played the Switch 1 version, but I would imagine it's a pretty substantial downgrade at this point. But yeah, it's out now on Switch 2, Switch, and every other. I think it's on Switch 1, but every
Wherever
other
you
major
play your
platform
video
as well.
games.
Yeah, wherever you get your fine video games, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 is available. Marcus, we're going to close out on a game you've been checking out. It's a bit of a weird one because Missile Command is a very classic arcade game, and this sounds like a version that has nothing to do with that classic arcade game. But Atari's been trying some interesting things here. They've been adapting, like Lunar Lander was kind of like an airborne Metroidvania a couple years ago, or maybe last year. And they're really doing some interesting stuff with their IP. What have they done to Missile Command?
Yeah, so Missile Command, I realized when I started this that I don't think I've ever actually played Missile Command. I've definitely played at least dabbled in some of the other like Atari classics, but and in my mind I'm like, I probably have touched this at some point, right? But the moment I started playing it, I was like, no, nothing's this doesn't seem familiar at all. I guess maybe I've just seen it but never played it. So surprisingly, this is a first-person narrative puzzle game.
Okay.
So you play as one of 4 friends, teenage friends, who decide to sneak into an abandoned military bunker because one of the friends is like a military, like a military brat.
Okay.
And so they're like, yeah, I know this bunker. We can sleep here. And they're like, oh yeah, this will be sick. And then very quickly they find themselves trapped there, and the computer simulations that you play Missile Command on sort of activate, and then there's also a old, like, potentially insane man who winds up living there that thinks that you are new recruits. And so the only way to get out of this bunker is to complete these Missile Command simulations. And so that is where the kind of like the core of the game is. So you're going to these terminals and you're playing what is this, I would imagine is a more sort of like fleshed out version of the original Missile Command, like, which if you've ever played Missile Command, it's just about like you have incoming missiles and you have to shoot down these missiles before they hit your base at the bottom of the screen. And in this case, it's in the form of like a turn-based strategy game. Like the developer, or Atari, has kind of compared it to Into the Breach in the sense that all of the enemy turn is kind of telegraphed, of like you're going to see the trajectories of the missiles before they come, so you have a chance to sort of like plot out, okay, I'm going to shoot a missile here because then when the turn plays, it'll catch this missile when it comes from like the northeast of the screen or whatever. And so every missile has an energy cost and a different sort of either range as well as explosion radius. And you can only bring so many into every encounter. And some encounters kind of pick them for you. And then others, you can just choose whatever loadout you think will work best. One of my knocks against the game is sort of when it's the missions where you're kind of free to choose, it's kind of hard to know what to pick because you don't really know what you're going in against. Like they do give you like a rough layout, like tell like these are missiles you're fighting, but it's like, that only matters if I know where they're coming from and when. So it's like you kind of have to go in blind. And then there was an element of trial and error of like, oh, okay, I failed this one because I guess I probably should have taken this missile because I didn't realize that one was going to come from this side of the screen. But yeah, you're just taking turns. You're spending energy points to play these missiles. And then the energy cost varies by stage. And so you can complete a stage one of 2 ways. You can either just win or you can ace it, which means you don't go above your allotted energy cost. So if your energy cost is 10, maybe you want to try to play missiles that, either are less or equal to 10 energy costs to play them. That would be fine, except, and I've not finished the game, but one of the other issues I've had with the game is that most of the mandatory missions require you to ace them, which is odd to me, because like it seems like that should just be like an extra credit kind of a thing, because sometimes it's hard enough just to win, or other times you just want to win and move on. But yeah, quite a few of them, weirdly enough, are like, no, you have to ace this one, and it's like, but this is the first time you've taught me this new mechanic. Isn't it good enough that I just figured out how to win?
Yeah, that's frustrating. I can't imagine why they would do that. Like, I like, is it almost kind of like a star system, or like how do they measure it? Like, is it's coming in underneath like the turns, or?
Yeah, it's just coming in or at your mana limit, whatever you want to call it, energy cost. So like if your energy cost is 10, as long as you don't go over 10, then you've aced it.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, which is very hard because some of these missiles take like 4 or 5 energy blocks. So you're like, okay, I gotta get real creative, which it does engender like to be, good strategy of, okay, like what can I use to stay under this cost, or what can I use in general, even if you're not adhering to the ace conditions. And it is like it is like fun, or at least like decently entertaining to sort of like plot these points. Like when you make it, it is satisfying to kind of like in your mind visualize, if I shoot these missiles here, it'll create this explosion that'll basically serve as a fiery wall that'll just intercept everything. And but then other missiles explode on a timer, because some explode immediately and some you have to wait a turn, so you can kind of plot in advance. Like, okay, by the time this blows up, this missile will be within its trajectory and get caught in it. And you're like, yeah, I nailed it. But because the turns take a while, it is that thing where it feels like you're taking your time building a very delicate house of cards. And then if you miss one card, everything collapses, because you only have to get hit once to fail. Like, not a single missile can get through. Wow. So you could spend a lot of turns just like, okay, I've carefully plotted out everything. And then you just did not calculate one missile, or you miscalculated and one slips through. And you're like, I have to do that all over again. I have to carefully plot out all the cards, which means having to remember, okay, which cards did I bring in? Because they all look the same, which is another problem I have, is that a lot of missiles are just sort of differentiated by, they have like energy costs and stuff like that, but visually they just look slightly different from each other. Like, oh, this missile has more fins, or this missile is like short. But I really, if I could change something, I would just color code them. So really just, I could pick out like, okay, red missiles do this, blue missiles do this. Okay. Because as it is, because they're all just the same kind of like yellow, I kind of have to stare at them for a little while to go like, okay, which one are you again? Were you the one that I liked last time? So that's a little tricky. So the fights can take a while, and also the UI for the actual missile command stuff isn't the most exciting to look at for how long it takes to get through a match, because it is waves of enemies that you have to go through before you finish. And then some instances you have to do multiple missile command matches in a row, and if you fail it, you have to start from the first one. So again, it's like building multiple house of cards over and over, and then
that is frustrating.
It can be. The other thing that's frustrating is how they tutorialize things. So there's no like explicit tutorial. There's no like text or like voice. There's no voice acting game in general, but there's nothing that just says this is how things work. A lot of the tutorialization is diegetic. There's like posters in rooms that just have diagrams that just show a picture of like, here's a missile, here's what this missile does when it hits something, and then here's how much energy it might cost. And you kind of have to go like, oh, I guess they're teaching me something. And at first you kind of wonder like, is this just for show, or is this like matter? And every time they introduce a new mechanic, they do it that way. But the problem with that is that they don't often tell you everything. Like, I've been stuck at a part where they introduce shields for the first time. So you can set up a little shield around your base. But the poster that tutorializes this is just three pictures. And one of them is lay down a shield. It doesn't tell you this. You just see a shield being laid down. You're like, okay. And then another one is you can shoot a shield like a laser. Like, it looks like just a straight laser. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. How do I didn't even know that was a thing. Is that the same card, or is that a different card? And then I've been stuck there trying to figure out how to do that. And then also I didn't realize I could move the shield, because apparently you can move it up and down. And I only found that out because I accidentally hit the D-pad, because otherwise I had no reason to think that you could move the position of a shield. So it's like, this would have been solved if this was just tutorialized in just a more straightforward manner. Because I'm failing matches because of this.
I would not do well with that. I get so frustrated when a game does not adequately tell you how to do something. Yeah, I would just be like, okay, you can. It's like if somebody's like, oh yeah, your car can also like serve as a boat, but like they don't tell you how to make that happen, and it's just like, all right, well, I guess I'm just going to drive into the water and see what happens. It's like, oh no, you had to reach under your seat and hit this one switch, and it's like, oh well, you didn't tell me that. You just told me I could do that. You didn't tell me how to do it.
Yeah, so it's weird because like there's some good ideas with how it's designed. Like I'm a turn-based strategy fan, and it's like, oh, this is like decently enjoyable, but there's just this could have been tightened up better, and even just the presentation, it just kind of gets boring to look at after a while. Like I almost wish they'd, again, this is I don't want to assign too many of my own like wishes on what in terms of instead of just accepting it for I guess what it is to an extent, but it almost feels like this could have been like a Pac-Man DX sort of thing of like, man, if this had that sort of flair to it of like things exploding and looking cool instead of kind of what it is. I don't get excited to play the Missile Command matches the further I go. But the other big part of the game that is surprising is that outside of doing Missile Command, the bunker that you're in is a fully explorable space. And so you can interact with your characters and you're having choice-driven conversations with them. And it seems like there is some element of bonding that you can do. Like you can kind of shift how they feel about you. I'm not sure how meaningful that winds up being, but there have been times where it's like you can almost talk about the other characters behind their back. And like I had one instance where something happened and then one of my friends is like, man, who do you think is responsible for this? And you get an option to pick one of the other people. And I didn't have a choice to be like, I don't think it's any of them. I had to pick somebody. And so I picked the military girl. And then like the next day, because this unfolds over a series of days, like you have to go to sleep and stuff. She like confronted me and it was like, I heard you talking, crap about me. What the hell? And it's like, I had to pick someone. The game wouldn't let me be diplomatic. It's like, I actually don't think it was you, but I had to choose somebody. But it's like, okay, is this going to matter later? Like, because she's kind of mad at me. But then you're also exploring, like you're doing like environmental puzzles that are completely different from Missile Command. Like you're finding key cards to open doors. You're doing these, honestly, more enjoyable puzzles for me of just like, solving these weird room riddles where like there was one where you're like have a projector and it's projecting this image of like a diagram, like arrows pointing to a bunch of circles, and you have to blow it up to different sizes and project it on different parts of the room until you realize it lines up and the circles are circling buttons that you have to push in the room that open like a secret passage. And you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. I had to figure that out on my own. That's like a really clever puzzle. And there's like several of those throughout the game. And I'm a puzzle game person. So I'm like, yeah, this is cool. I'm digging this stuff. It's completely different from what this game, I guess, is going for. But it's
it breaks
also
up the
very
monotony.
important. Yeah, like it kind of feels like a it has shades of like a Resident Evil game without the combat and zombies, of like finding key cards and weird little things in your inventory and then figuring out where it goes or what to use it on, and then just finding bespoke puzzles in all these different rooms and then finding new parts of the bunker to explore. Like that part's good. And the more I play, the more I kind of like sigh when it's like, oh, it's time to play Missile Command. Okay. You got to get back to this.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate. I think that inventory management thing would drive me crazy as well, if that's like one of the main thrusts.
It's very basic. It is not nearly like as involved as like a Resident Evil game. It's just like, you have a key card. You'll find that door probably like around two corners and use it, Yeah. At least from what I played. I don't know. Maybe it does get more complex the later it goes.
Well, it is out now on Switch and every other major platform. I was trying to look up what the developers had done before, and I guess one of them did Runbow, which was like a platforming game, I think co-op platforming game back like on like the Wii U. Yeah. I think I remember playing that, and not much else that I recognize, to be honest. There's two developers, Mighty Yell and 13 AM.
I know Mighty Yell because they did. I think they did a game called The Big Con that I played from a few years ago. It's like a funny little adventure game.
Okay, well, those are the studios behind this, and Atari is the publisher. But anything else we need to talk about with Missile Command Delta before we wrap up this episode, Marcus?
Not really. Although I was gonna say, and I in terms of Nintendo games, because we talked about this years ago. I finally bought, because it was on sale, Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury.
Yes.
And I've been playing Bowser's Fury, and it's really good. I know that I'm late to the party on that, but it's a good-ass Mario game.
It's a very good Mario game. Like I think a lot of people skipped it because like Mario 3D World, they're like, oh, it's a Wii U game, I don't need to buy it.
Even though it's a great game.
Even though, yeah, I think also maybe the most underrated Mario game. I think that people sleep on that game a lot. I know Wes is a defender of saying that I think he says that's the best 3D Mario game, which I won't go that far.
That's a spicy take. I don't know. I don't know if it's better than Galaxy, but it is very good.
Wes brings the heat when he gives his takes. True. He also says Final Fantasy 13 is the best Final Fantasy. So we'll let him have his fun. But
yeah, but it's been Bowser's Fury has been my like before bed game because it's so kind of like digestible. Like you just get in like, I'm just gonna get a few cat shines and then go to bed. So it's been like my late night, just winding down game.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you did that. I think more people should get it. Like I don't know how much longer the Switch sale is going on, but there are a lot of games that are on sale right now.
And it was actually a sale for them. It was like, oh, this is $20. That's like wow, for you guys, this is like a real discount.
That is a deep discount on a Nintendo game. So
that's why I bought it. I was like, I have no plans to buy any new games, but like, I can't miss this. This will never happen again.
20 years from now, it might get another $20 discount.
I know. I went on the rooftop. I said, everybody, Nintendo's got a real sale.
I think Odyssey is also included in the sale. There's a few other first-party games that I'm like, wow, okay. Nintendo is actually putting stuff on discount. That is surprising.
They should. They got that Switch 2 money now.
Exactly. But Marcus, I'm glad that you were playing that. Keep me up to date about like how you feel about it as you get to the end, because I think that's a really, really great Mario game, and hopefully a peek into the direction that the Mario team is taking, since obviously they're not making the 3D Mario game because the team is doing Donkey Kong Bonanza. But that should be the game that we talk about next week. Unfortunately, I'm not getting an advance code for Donkey Kong Bonanza, so I'll have to try and find a guest who did when Game Informer was shut down. Yeah, and then take theirs. When Game Informer was shut down, unfortunately, we fell off of the list of advance copies. So we're still trying to get back on that. So we'll have to tap somebody else. Maybe I'll see if Logan wants to come back on, since I'm sure he is playing that game. I don't know. I haven't talked to him about it, but I'm sure he's got plenty of reasons to play that game. So that's what we'll probably do next week. But we'll have to see where the week takes us. But Marcus, thank you so much for joining me for this second segment of the episode.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be back.
And thank you so much for everyone for listening. As you know, my Patreon and the associated Discord server are the best ways to get any questions or comments in. But you can also get in touch with me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com, or hit me up on Blue Sky or Instagram at Brian P. Shea. Marcus, where can everyone find you online?
You can find me almost exclusively on Blue Sky at Marcus Stewart 7, which is the number 7.
And of course, you can find both of our work over on GameInformer.com or Game Informer Magazine. Just go to GameInformer.com/subscribe if you would like to get copies of the issue. That is our show for this week. Thank you again for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time. Before we wrap up this episode of All Things Nintendo, I just want to give a special shout out to the $10 patrons of the show. Alex Stadnick, Andy Junkins, Ben Richland, Chaps My Ass, Derek Sigmund, Dusty Beeman, Ian T. Clark, Jason Thompson, Jawar Hello, Johnny Five, Jose Villalobos, Joshua DeProy, KC Radio Man, Cody Gibson, Creeper 207, Pat Roberts, Paul at Drunk on Mako, Pratable, Rob McCann, Bobby Mac 265, Robert Sousa, Roberto Nieves, Roger Reichert, Russell Sayer, Smithy Poo, Zachary Pliggy, and Zek 3-Sword Sama. Thank you so much for your continued support. You are the reason I am able to continue doing this show week after week.
Hello, it's Ian from Respect the Crit. an inclusive tabletop RPG actual play podcast about exploring new worlds.
Our camera pans down on the world of Ord Mantell.
New characters.
Carolus would like to make a counter offer.
Chinese 2 Scoops Charizard.
If that's your voice, I'm gonna be so excited.
Yeah. And playing whatever we want to play. Sabak!
What a great game.
From Dungeons and Dragons.
Can you roll another d20?
12.
You, for the next 72 hours, are 12 years old.
Oh no!
To the post-apocalypse.
He's a vault dweller, you could probably tell with the jumpsuit and everything like that. Hey, lads, you gotta tell me where your vault is?
It's not gonna happen.
We've got stories in all kinds of settings, including video games.
This is gonna be a Sephiroth-free experience.
Horror.
Crawling out of the mirror, a nightmarish amalgamation of twisted limbs and jagged teeth, its visage a grotesque mockery of humanity.
Oh my god! And a galaxy far, far away.
This is fun, let's do it again! And then he'll punch it and we'll go into light speed.
The dice tell a story, and we have a hell of a lot of fun rolling with it.
No way.
No.
Are you
joking
me?
Oh my god. This is so... Yes.
Whatever the system, miss or a hit, you always gotta respect the crit. Join us bi-weekly, every other Wednesday for characters, campaigns, and new episodes, anywhere podcasts exist.